弟兄姊妹，你慣咗新常態未啊？
So, brother and sister, are you used to the new normal?
戴口罩，
Perhaps wearing mask,
枕住戴，
continuing wearing it,
唔除得，
can take it off.
都係一個好嘅操練同埋一個適應嚇。
Certainly, such an adjustment and also a lesson for each one of us.
求主提醒我哋咧，能夠戴口罩保護自己，同樣地亦保護大家。
May the Lord remind us, wearing masks, it's not only protecting yourself, but others as well.
嗱，我好係戰兢地再問一個問題，
So
我哋今年嘅主題係乜嘢啊？
I ask, what's the theme for this church, or for the church this year?
所以返教會就容易啲答呢個問題啊。
It's perhaps easy
記唔記得
easier.
我哋喺每一個月嘅第一個嘅主日，我哋睇邊一個嘅人物？
If you say remember, for the first Sunday worship of the day, we would look at a character in the Bible.
記唔記得啊？
So do you remember?
唔記得啦，我都話會令我好傷心嘅。大衛，
So David, it's the character, we've been studying.
上次我哋睇到大衛正式建立佢自己嘅王國，揀選佢嘅首都。
So last time we studied, how David built his very own kingdom and choosing, his own capital of his city.
我唔知你覺唔覺得大衛係一個敬畏神嘅人咧？
I'm not so sure whether you know and understand David. It's someone who's after God's heart.
佢個仔就好相信敬畏耶和華係智慧嘅開端，認識至聖者便是
His
聰
son
明。
knew very well the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding.
弟兄姊妹，我唔理大衛係咪一個敬畏神嘅人，我想問大家，你認同呢句説話嗎？
Whether, David, it's a whole reference for the Lord. I don't really care, but are you someone?
認同嗎？
Do you agree with this statement, this psalm?
你真係認同？如果你
Do you
真係認同嘅時候，你問一問自己，你算唔算一個敬畏神嘅人呢？
So if you agree with, this scripture, ask yourself, are you someone who hold reference for God?
點樣衡量自己係一個敬畏神嘅人呢？
And how do you evaluate yourself whether you referee like
你
the
有
Lord?
咩嘅表示，以致你覺得自己係一個敬畏神嘅人呢？
So how do you behave yourself such that, you're someone who hold reference for the
如
Lord?
果我哋每常常都咁樣去反省自己，你就真係能夠經歷到敬畏耶和華係智慧嘅開端。
If you're able to continue to evaluate yourself, then perhaps then you're fully living, the scripture here, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
因為你能夠領會到呢個説話嘅真義。
For you truly understand the essence, of
當
this
我
psalm.
哋睇撒母耳記下嘅第6章，
So when we looked at 2 Samuel, the book, chapter 6,
我哋會發現，我哋會好容易俾一啲嘅問題去困擾住。
certainly sometimes we got caught up with some of the questions from reading the scriptures.
因為撒母耳記下嘅第6章講到，冇錯，大衛建立個國都之後嘅時候，佢有一個心意。
So apparently in chapter 6 of 2 Samuel that David built, after he built his kingdom, he had a heart.
我有國都，我好想將神嘅約櫃能夠運到耶路撒冷大衛城嘅當中，因為約櫃係代表神自己嘅同在。
Now that, David had built his own kingdom, his capital, his only wish was to bring the order of God into, the city of David. And because the art, represents the presence of God.
呢個係咪一件好事咧？
Was this, a good thing to do?
弟兄姊妹，你有冇諗過呢個係咪一個好事啊？
Have you thought of this? Was this a good thing to do?
呢個係一件好事喎，但係喺第6章嘅裏邊咧發生一件事。
Certainly this, meant to be a good thing. But in chapter 6, an
當
incident
佢
happened.
將約櫃擺喺牛車嘅當中運送嘅途中，
So apparently when the order of God, was put on this cart ready for transport,
隻牛就突然驚一驚，
somehow the cattle, was shaken up, and
隻牛蹄就發軟啦。
so his legs started to falter.
咁就跪低嘅時候，咁佢個車裏邊咧就跪低啦。
So apparently when the cow, his front feet,
哇！當
were
喺呢
crushed.
個危急之際嘅時候咧， 約櫃再嚟跌啦，烏撒係伸一手擋一擋嘅時候，烏撒死咗。
So, in that, split of a second when the ark was like falling onto the ground, Uzzah, used his hands to try to kind of like lift it.
好多人讀到呢一度嘅時候，就停喺個時候，喂，咁好心嘅人嘅時候，點解會神擊殺佢咧？
So Uzzah died, but like people would ask, like, why? Like he meant well, he was trying to support. Why did he
呢
die?
件事之後嘅時候咧，大衛又 hesitate，究竟好冇將約櫃再運落去耶路撒冷？
And after this incident, when Uzzah was killed, he died. And David started to puzzle, was it a good thing to bring the ark of God into my city?
如果你睇掛牆嘅日曆9月份嘅時候講到敬畏。
Apparently, if you look to your hanging calendar, like for the month of September, it is about reverie.
好，我哋就將撒母耳記下嘅第6章，我哋學一個敬畏嘅功課。
So certainly from this particular chapter 6 of 2 Samuel, we're going to learn what does it mean by holding reverence for God.
我哋嘗試從3個嘅人物嘅身上學習乜嘢叫敬畏。
Certainly, we're trying to learn from 3 characters, in this particular scripture to learn about what does it mean by holding reverence for
我
God.
哋嘗試從烏撒嘅身上，我哋拆解乜嘢叫做唔敬畏，
So
唔
let's
敬畏神。
study from the life of Uzzah and what does it mean by a lack of or the absence of like reverence for God.
我哋又分別從俄別以東同埋大衛嘅身上學習嘅敬畏嘅功課。
And likewise, we studied from Obed, Edom, and also David, and from their life experiences, what does he mean by holding reverence for
留
God?
意撒母耳記下嘅第6章第6節嘅時候，講到到了蘭嘅禾場，因為牛失前蹄滑作荊條，烏撒就伸手扶住神嘅約櫃。
If you recall, we just read verse 6 in chapter 6. When they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the oxen stumbled.
烏撒係亞比拿達2個仔其中一個。
So Uzzah, is one of the sons, of Abinadab.
約櫃喺亞比拿達家已經一段好長嘅時間。
Apparently, the ark of God, stationed at an Abinadab's home for quite some time.
當大衛叫運送約櫃嘅時候，佢2個仔，一個喺前，一個喺後。
So apparently, when David commanded the ark to be moved to his city, that Abinadab's 2 sons, Uzzah and Ahio.
亞希就喺前啦，
So Ahio was in the front,
烏撒就喺後。
and Uzzah, was
所
in
以
the back.
驚跳嘅時候咧，烏撒睇得好清楚，第一個反應就係咁做。
So certainly, when the oxen stumbled, Uzzah saw it clearly. So his first reaction was to kind of offer help.
嗱，我哋好容易睇到呢段經文嘅時候，我哋第一個反應就覺得神好似不近人情。
Certainly, when we first read these scriptures, we thought how disheartful, of God.
好心唔得好報。
So certainly, Uzzah meant well, but apparently, his outcome was totally
當然
unexpected.
你仲唔該都唔好聲，仲要殺埋我。
So certainly Uzzah, did try to help, but indeed his help warranted his death.
嗱，如果你有呢一個嘅印象咧，請你將呢一個印象擺埋一邊先。
So certainly if you have that thought or that impression, I invite you to
你唔好
kind of
諗
put
到
that
你嘅
impression
所信
aside.
嘅神咁無情啊！
Perhaps then, your weight of the Lord is
神咁樣
why
嘅
it was so heartless.
神咁樣嘅做法一定有佢嘅原因，係咪？
Apparently what God did, what he did, there was a purpose.
我哋嘗試了解嘅原因，先至喺當中去判斷。
Perhaps we should fully understand the reason behind God's judgment before then, we make our own judgment.
第6節形容一件事嘅表達，第7節解釋嘅原因。
So certainly verse 6, describe, how the whole incident happened, and verse 7 provided a reason.
第7節講乜嘢咧？一齊讀。
So let's read together verse 7. The Lord's
神耶和華向
anger
烏
burned
西發
against
怒，
Uzzah
因
because
這
of his
錯誤擊
irreverent
殺他
act.
他就死
Therefore
在
God
神
struck
的
him
約
down, and
櫃
he
旁。
died there beside the ark
喺
of
第
God.
7節嘅裏邊，中文聖經形容到，因這錯誤去擊殺烏撒。
So the Lord, had Uzzah die because of his irreverent
嗱，
act.
如果我哋睇中文聖經嘅時候，即係形容佢一個嘅錯誤。但如果你用NIV 嘅譯法嘅時候咧，係表達佢一種不敬畏嘅表現。
So the English translation clearly outlined that God struck him down because of Uzzah's irreverent act.
嗱，記住一個不敬畏，究竟佢做咗乜嘢係不敬畏咧？記住先。
So let's remember, what did he do, to show that he had no reverence for God?
嗱，亞蘭文咧，佢講到咧呢個錯誤咧，其實有一種叫做輕忽嘅意思。
Apparently, the mistake made, in the Chinese version, it means
亞蘭文
irreverent in alarming.
啊，咁啊有嗰種叫輕忽，
So also being thoughtless or
諗
thoughtfulness.
都唔諗下。
So didn't give much thought to it.
嗱，你再退多一步嘅時候咧，
So if we step back,
如果呢一個地方過咗之後，大衛俾佢擊殺嘅地方叫做比斯烏撒。
so David named this place when Uzzah was struck down. He named it Perez like Uzzah.
比斯烏撒嘅時候嘅意思就係烏撒嘅違背啊。
So apparently, in translation, it means like Uzzah, somehow, his disobedience.
against
Or
啊
against
咁我哋嘗試去了解到，原來喺聖經裏邊形容到烏撒呢個動作係一個不敬，係一個輕率，係一個違背嘅一個表現。
So apparently in the Bible, like what was described of Uzzah's behavior at the time, it was irreverent, being thoughtless, and it was against, opposing.
嗱，咁我哋嘗試了解究竟點解佢犯咗呢啲嘅情況。
Perhaps let's try to understand why did he do? Why
民
Uzzah
數記
did.
第4章第15節咁樣喎。
So in the book of Numbers, it says,
將要起營嘅時候，亞倫和他的兒子把聖所和聖所一切嘅器具遮蓋完了，該轄的子孫就要來抬，只是不可摸聖物，免得他們死亡。
so apparently from the book of Numbers, chapter 4, after Aaron and his sons have finished covering the holy furnishing and all the holy articles, and when the camp is ready to move, the Kohathites, are to come to do the carrying, but they must not touch the holy things or they will die.
明白？所以聖經裏邊好清楚嘅時候，聖物可唔可以摸啊？
So apparently in the Bible, can anybody touch these holy things?
唔可以摸㗎。
Apparently you cannot. No one
嗱，
can
可能
touch.
你話，哎呀，可能烏撒唔知啫。
And perhaps you might justify and say, well, perhaps
特
Uzzah,
別我哋
didn't
Chinese
know.
啊，即係
Perhaps,
有咩錯嘅時候就即刻講嘛，不知者不罪。
perhaps
咁你可以冇事㗎咯喎。
in our culture that, there's an idiom that say, well, if you don't know it, then you're guilt-free.
但係 Chinese 都有一句説話，罪加一等啊。
Apparently, maybe, your transgressions are doubled.
嗱，呢啲明唔明啊？唔好忘記烏撒亦都係一個利未家族嘅背景啊嘛。
So apparently Uzzah came from the Levitites, like tribe.
唔係嘛，所以佢應該好熟悉啲舊約嘅儀式嘅律法嘅規矩，全部應該好熟悉嘅。
Certainly Uzzah, would be fully knowledgeable about like some of the Judea traditions and their worship like customs and practices.
所以佢接觸呢一個嘅約櫃嘅情況嘅時候，呢個係表示佢冇聽從神自己嘅吩咐嘅一個表現。
So apparently, the way, his behavior, his responses was a representation of his ignorance of God's command.
或者去忽視啦。
So, or, he just ignored these teachings.
嗱，如果我哋繼續去留意啲佢去睇研究嘅時候，
So if we continue on this kind of line of research,
點解我哋話烏撒佢呢一個表達嘅做法係一個好輕率嘅做法？
So why would we judge like Uzzah's behave as like somewhat thoughtfulness?
嗱，你會記得咧，當佢運送一個嘅約櫃嘅途中，
So apparently en route when they were carrying the Ark of God
佢
in
用乜嘢運
transit,
送啊？
so what did they use to transport the Ark of
你有
God?
冇諗過咩？
牛車。
啊，一個牛車。
So it was an oxen.
大衛特
kind
登
of like,
訂造一個新款嘅牛車。
so apparently David, had constructed some sort of an oxen cart.
我原來將約櫃用牛車嚟運送啊！
So apparently at the time, the Ark of God was being carried by an oxen cart.
因為嗰個人唔知啊，但係利未家族應該好清楚啊，約櫃嘅結構係點樣？
So apparently, from the Levitite tribe, they should be fully aware of how they should construct this cart.
約櫃四邊有一啲嘅環嘅時候，係俾人穿咗一啲嘅槓桿嘅時候，而係去抬嘅，唔係去用牛車去推嘅。
So apparently, what they were commanded to do was to make a cart with 4 gold rings on the side so that, they would be carrying, it with poles.
嗱，所以你會睇到點解我哋話該撒係一個輕率嘅錯誤咧？
So apparently, why we judge that Uzzah, he was just thoughtless.
佢都是是但但。
So he was just like, laissez-faire, couldn't care less kind of attitude.
你可能就話台同車現代化。
So perhaps you might say, well, like to carry or to pull it with a cart, it's kind of a modern way of doing things.
用車推慳水慳力。
So perhaps using a cart, would save some labor and energy.
嗱，弟兄姊妹，我哋就要睇一睇個背景。
So let's kind of take a look at the background then.
當時用牛車係咩個表現咧？係做咩嘅情況做過咧？係非利士人即係攞咗約櫃，係用牛車去搬嘅。
So apparently using a cattle cart had been a practice used by the Philistines.
所以非利士人因此嚟嘅山痔瘡係咪？你記得嘛？
So the Philistines, they use a cattle cart to move the Ark of God away, and eventually, they were tumors. They had tumors.
所以呢個用
punishment.
牛車去裝，可能係異教嘅一種嘅表達嚟。
So apparently using a cattle cart to move the Ark of God, this practice was totally belonged to the Gentile.
嗱，咁同埋第二樣嘅時候，我哋跳落個當時嘅背景嘅時候，用車推係咪通常用嚟做乜嘢啊？
So apparently, at the time, let's imagine when we use a cart
你
to
就
try
嚟搬啦
to move things.
你搬嘅時候，有時哎呀又唔夠力啊，將啲嘢擺喺架車拉車度推啦，係咪？
Perhaps you would use a trolley. You're moving stuff, you use a trolley and you can move things more efficiently.
我哋通常擺啲乜嘢喺架車度？
So what do you put, on a cart to move?
我唔係講你架車喎，
So what do you,
貨物啊。
so perhaps you put
你明嗎？
goods.
我如果即係擺喺牛車嘅時候，你當約櫃係一件貨物嘅。
So apparently if you use a cart to move, so you basically recognize this Ark of God was just like any objects that you are moving.
喺舊以前嘅時代，乜嘢嘅情況先要抬啊？
So in those days, in what circumstances would people actually use poles to carry something or someone?
大官貴人係咪？
So apparently when you move the
大小抬你。
royalties, right? So like a carriage,
你諗下，
you
以
use
前
human power to carry.
即係你咁中意睇中國劇又好，韓劇乜嘢，以前嘅皇朝都係大轎抬噶嘛。
So apparently if you like those Korean dramas that royalties are being
所以
moved,
個
by
抬嘅時候
a
代表一
carriage.
種嘅尊重，一種嘅敬畏嘅表現。但係烏撒容許用牛車去載嘅時候，好明顯 一個利未人忽略咗呢啲規矩嘅時候，係佢嘅輕忽，冇諗過。
So apparently Uzzah, this is a true indication of how Uzzah was so thoughtless because, he used a cart instead of like human power to move the order of God. This is a clear demonstration of his ignorance and thoughtfulness. Thirdly,
阿烏撒，
so Uzzah,
你知唔知烏撒個名點解？
do you know what's the meaning of his
你
name?
你喺整件事嘅時候，你覺得烏撒咧好一個好自然嘅反應。
So apparently your first response was like, yeah, Uzzah was just being reflex. His reflex was good. He reacted right away. Mm-hmm.
如果假設啊，
Yeah, let's imagine.
個冷氣機準備跌落嚟，
So let's, the air conditioner is just about to like fall down.
嗱唔使驚啊，假設嚟啊，
No worry. Let's imagine.
你會點啊？
So
走啦，係咪啊？
perhaps my reaction, if it's going to fall on my head, I'm going to kind of like step aside.
除
Kind of
非一
like,
個原因
except with one reason.
跌落嚟 piece of cake，搞掂。
Or maybe, you would be feeling, oh, well, it fall down piece of cake. I
嗱，我
can
講
use
呢
a
個
finger.
係個冷氣啊，如果個仔啊，梗係接啦，係咪？
So we're talking about an air conditioner. But however, if it's your son, then perhaps, you would quickly move
好
over
得意
and
喎！
catch him.
原來烏撒個名係咩意思咧？
So apparently, the meaning of Uzzah's name is,
烏撒嘅名叫烏撒嘅意思就係咩？強壯有力。
so Uzzah's name means that, he's strong and he has strength.
即係換句話講嘅時候咧，改你叫烏撒，因為你叫阿強啊。
So apparently Uzzah meaning that, or some of us
嗱
call，
我哋唔知啊，佢
strong
哋知道嘅意思啊嘛。所以烏撒嘅時候，阿烏撒，咦，muscle man。
So apparently Uzzah, perhaps he believed himself that, he was strong and he was mighty.
你成日叫佢做阿強，我都覺得自己強啲喎。
So sometimes, if you name someone Uzzah,
嗱，我唔知會唔
they'll
會咧？
believe he's strong.
阿烏撒，你當時有一個反應啊，
So Uzzah's
我點啊？
response
我叫
was,
阿強，你啊？
so, oh wow, the art of God was falling, so let me kind of like take hold of that.
如果係咁嘅時候，
So let's imagine if this is actually true.
咁烏撒就睇自己嘅能力高過神自己。
So apparently, his behavior represents that, Uzzah looked at his own strength, was
試
far
想
greater
像
than
一
God.
下，
So let's imagine this.
如果當時神冇擊殺烏撒嘅，
So let's say God, did not
Oh.
strike down Uzzah.
歷史會點講咧？
So what would history, told us?
撒母耳記下嘅時候，當殺電光火石之間，
So, in the second book of Samuel, in a split of a second,
烏撒作出明智嘅決定，不
烏撒
得已伸出嘅手，
Uzzah made a very smart decision and he extended his hand
救咗約櫃，
that he saved the
免
entire
得
art
神嘅約
of
櫃
God.
跌喺泥辦嘅當中。
So to avoid like the art of God falling into the mud.
哇！我哋應該烏撒係以色列人拯救神嘅一個民族英雄。
Certainly Uzzah, would become like, a cultural hero because he single-handedly held, the art of God
你
from
明我意
falling
思
down.
嘛？
So do you understand what it really meant?
神救你定你救神啊？
So God saved you or the other way around that you thought you saved
值得我
God?
哋去留意喎。今日我哋去幫神，定係我哋神去幫我哋咧？有時
So
我哋
certainly,
就算服侍緊嘅時候，我哋係幫緊神，定係神幫緊我哋？
so certainly it's for us today, do we think that we are helping God or we are serving God or, the other way
烏
around?
撒睇自己嘅能力過於神自己。
Certainly Uzzah looked to his own strength far greater than God's.
神可唔可以叫嗰堆泥突然聖化咗？
So, would God be able to said that, or to order, command that, the mud turn into something else.
有人曾經咁樣講過，
Someone once said,
因為約櫃停留咗喺亞比拿特家裏邊有一段頗長嘅時間。
Someone once said that because the Ark of God had stationed at the home of Abinadab
有
for
人
quite
統
some
計
time.
過，大約有70年嘅時間。
Apparently, a period of like 70 years
咁
at
即係
least.
可能係烏撒出世嘅時候咧，約櫃已經喺度。
So apparently, when Uzzah was born, the Ark of God, was already, in his father's home.
嗱，咁所以咧，烏撒由細到大嘅時候咧，個約櫃喺度啊，唔好搞啊，唔好掂，咁啊，跟住唔好掂，唔好搞咯，係咁簡單啦。
So apparently, growing up, Uzzah, had learned pretty well that that he is not supposed to touch, at all the Ark of God.
烏撒喺約櫃喺烏撒嘅腦海裏邊，佢嘅價值係乜嘢？
So, what is the value of the Ark of God, in Uzzah's mind? What do
係
you
一個
think?
聖物啦，
So, was it a sanctified
一個
object?
神同在嘅地方，
And certainly a place where God resides.
定係已經長期喺屋企裏邊，只係佢一個家具，一個冇人去掂，可能
Or,
封埋塵嘅一個家具。
or perhaps the Ark of God has been there for such a long time. Perhaps it's just kind of like a piece of furniture, with dust on it that nobody's supposed to touch.
你試下翻屋企去 basement 抄下，你搬屋啊，抄下有冇一啲嚇？
So perhaps you go home and you get to the
可能
basement.
你好
and-
有價值紀念嘅嘢，但係屋企人覺得，抌咗啦，冇意思啊。
So perhaps you have lots of like things in the basement. It's all collecting dust, and your family might say that throw that away. You don't have use of
如果
that.
係咁嘅話，烏撒嘅腦海裏邊約櫃係忽視咗分別為聖嘅重要。
Apparently, Uzzah have failed like to recognize the Ark of God is a sanctified object. He
Ông
failed
kia.
to set it apart from anything else.
以上咁樣嘅分析，你仲覺唔覺得烏撒真係死得唔抵啊？
Based on the above
當然我哋唔
analysis,
會覺得佢抵死啊，係咪？
based on the above analysis, would you say that that somehow it was wrong for him to be struck dead?
你覺得烏撒死得合理嘛？
So perhaps would you say that Uzzah died like with good reasons?
如果烏撒佢一個利未人，
Uzzah, it's a
忽視
Levite.
神嘅吩咐，
He ignored God's
唔識
commands.
分別為聖，
He failed to set
對
apart
神
God's
嘅
holy object.
聖物去輕，
So, he was being thoughtless
當神
about
只係一
God's
個家具、
holy,
一個貨物去運輸。
treating like, the Ark of God as just like some sort of a piece of like furniture, like to move around.
你而家知道神點解要擊殺佢嘛？
Now you learn why God
你
had
諗
to
下，
struck him dead.
烏撒抵死嘛？
So, do you think that, did he deserve to die?
抵死嘛？ 嚇？你大聲啲啊！做乜咁驚啫？又睇唔到你，睇到我呀！
I want to hear
Bye,
from
bye.
you. Did he deserve to die?
抵死喎，唔好忘記喎。
So he
Really?
deserved.
啊，
To
如
die.
果牧師咁做，你抵死嘛？
So if like, pastor, did the same thing, would you say that, yeah, right, he deserved to be punished?
抵嘛？放心咩人會秋後算賬嘅咧？
No one
言論自
dared
由
to
啊嘛！
answer.
弟兄姊妹，你諗下，可能你覺得，牧師，如果你咁啊，你真係抵死喎，係咪？或者弟兄姊妹諗下喎，因為我係牧師嘛，但係唔好忘記你係唯有你係君尊嘅祭司、聖潔嘅國度、屬神嘅子民。我抵死，你都抵死噶咯喎！如果同樣，
So perhaps we look at like, did he deserve to die? Did anyone else deserve to die? We are all the same in the eyes of God because we've been called as, the holy priest.
我
For
相
God.
信聖經記載烏撒呢件事，要求人可覺敬畏神嘅功課。
So apparently why this scripture was included in the Bible, there was a lesson for
當我
each one
哋
of us to learn of the reference
當
for
我哋
God.
親近神嘅時候，我哋千祈唔好輕率，唔好忽略咗神嘅吩咐。
So certainly when we come to worship our God, that we cannot be irreverent or being thoughtless.
唔好睇自己過於所當行。
And never, to look upon ourselves as much greater, than our holy God.
弟兄姊妹，你屋企有冇聖物？
So brother and sister, do you have sanctified objects at home?
俾個 tips 你嘅，你喺屋企有個聖物。
Do you have
如果
holy
你話
objects?
啲我冇，
in
我
the
環保，我唔買聖經嘅，我有 app， 咁呢個咪你嘅聖物咯。
So perhaps you say, I don't have the holy book. And I'm kind of an environmentalist. I have my cell phone that carry the Bible. And this is then, will be the holy object that you hold in your home.
聖經會唔會只係你屋企一個家具，定係一個聖物？
Would the Bible, be just a piece of kind of like furniture in your home, or is being regarded as a holy object? Or, you have it thrown
封晒塵
around, or it's been all dusted
定
up,
係你好好恭恭敬敬打開閱讀？
or, you respectfully that, you read it and use it every day
敬拜。
to worship.
今日我哋會講到，我哋會睇現代，我哋喺 pandemic 嘅情況，敬拜都係一個新嘅常態。
So certainly, during the pandemic period that, worship has become a new normal as well, our
可能
part
有啲
of
教會
new
淨係
normal.
online 敬拜，
For some churches, they only
敬拜係錄
hold
咗音嘅。
virtual worship and they just play
而
recordings.
家我哋有 online 有現場，
But for us now, we are in person as well as we have
無
it
論我
worship
哋用
online.
乜嘢嘅新嘅常態，唔好忽略咗我哋嚟到神嘅面前敬拜嗰種敬畏嘅心。
So regardless of the ways now we hold to worship God, but one, it's never changed, that we never ignore our heart coming to worship.
以幾廿年前嘅時候，啲人行好耐先至去敬拜，坐個零鐘，跟住行翻2、3差唔多半日。星期日嘅活動就係行3個鐘去敬拜，跟住坐一陣嘅時候，又行翻3個鐘，咁啊成日㗎啦。
So decades ago, people went for worship. They might have to walk for a couple hours, to go. They participate in the worship and took at the same time to walk home. So the whole day, of worship would be like this.
以前嘅人冇電話，
So in the old days, there was no
冇電腦，
phones, there was no computers,
冇 internet，
and no internet.
但佢哋每一次星期日就珍惜嚟到神嘅面前，恭恭敬敬敬拜神，親近神。
But yet every Sunday, they come before the Lord with a whole heart and yearning, to come closer to God.
新嘅常態，
So under the new normal,
好多教會、好多機構，乜嘢都抌晒上網。
so a lot of churches or even organizations that, everything just about go online.
啲信徒係咁棘，係咁棘。
So Christians alike, they just kind of go to the computer and just click.
我唔係話呢啲唔好，
Certainly, don't get me wrong,
但會唔
I'm
會
not
今
saying
日
these
因
are
為
wrong.
科技嘅進步，唔係幫助我哋對屬靈嘅事更加深入，或者會唔會形成到我哋每一次棘嘅時候，可能我哋冇一個敬虔嘅心，恭恭敬敬嘅去領受上帝今日現在對我講嘅説話。
Certainly, technology helps, but would it become a barrier such that we no longer have that committed heart and mind and reverence for God as we come before Him to worship Him?
聖餐，
The Holy Communion.
我哋會唔會睇呢一個係一個好慎重嘅一個聖禮？
Would we regard the communion
我哋
as a
好
holy
珍
ordinance
惜去嚟到領受嘅聖餐。
that we cherish, and yearn to want to come before the communion
而我
table?
領受呢個餅嘅時候係恭恭敬敬，
And when we partake in the bread, that we come with a heart full of
或者
respect.
我哋冇去領受嘅時候，我哋覺得生命裏邊有一啲嘅缺乏。
Or, when we fail, like to come before it, we feel that, there's some lacking, in our kind of like physical living.
哥林多嘅時代，佢哋輕忽聖餐。
In the times at the Corinthian church, that they ignore or fail like to respect communion. So the Apostle Paul wrote letters and encouraged them, to reflect.
恭敬嘅心，你只係吃喝緊自己嘅罪啊！
And, he wrote to the Corinthian believers that, you have to show your respect. Otherwise, you'll be eating and
而
drinking
你咪
of
先
the
提
body
醒
of
我
the
哋嘅
Lord.
時候，我哋所信嘅耶和華神係監察人內心、試驗人肺腑嘅神。
In the book of Jeremiah, that it says, I, the Lord, search the heart and examine the mind
人
of
可能睇
man.
烏撒睇外表發生件咁嘅事，
Perhaps people look to Uzzah, of his outer
神
appearances.
睇到烏撒嘅心。
But yet the Lord discerned like Uzzah's heart and his
輕忽
mind.
輕忽
That, he was
忽視
irreverent.
神嘅吩咐，
He was being thoughtless about God's commands for him.
睇自己舉所當行，
He looked to his very own strength more than
全
God's.
心係違背緊神。
So wholeheartedly, he chose to ignore
弟兄姊妹，
God's
今日
commands.
讓我哋能夠喺烏撒嘅身上有一個好好嘅提醒。
Brother and sister, let us learn from the lessons, the life of Uzzah.
今日我哋
Today.
嚟到上帝嘅面前，讓我哋恭恭敬敬去親近神。
As we come before the Lord, may we bring a heart full of respect and reverence for God.
當我哋再睇第二個嘅人，
So now we turn to look at, a second character.
叫做俄別以東。
So his name is Obed-Edom.
當烏撒事件之後，
After the incident with Uzzah,
大衛第一個反應，
so David's first response was,
除咗好嬲烏撒你搞單咁嘅嘢出嚟，
so certainly he was upset with Uzzah, and so what happened now?
大衛咁話：耶和華嘅約櫃怎可運到我這裏來？
So David, his response was, how can the art of the Lord ever come to me?
於是大衛不肯將耶和華嘅約櫃運到大衛城。
And therefore David was not willing to take the art of the Lord to be with him in the city of David.
卻運到加特人俄別以東嘅家中。
Instead, he took the art aside to the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite.
嗱，當時呢件事之後嘅時候咧，約櫃掀起一個嘅爭論啊！
So after, this incident, certainly, there were kind of controversies, erupted over the art of God.
約櫃嚟到係福定係禍咧？
So apparently, the controversy was was it a good thing, a blessing, or
Yeah,
a curse
yeah,
that
yeah.
the art comes to us? So let's
經歷
imagine.
咁嘅事之後，
So after, this incident with Uzzah,
阿大衛話益你喎，
so David said that, hey, I have something good for you.
去你屋企喎。
Now I'm bringing the art of God to your house.
想唔想啊？
Do you want it?
邊個要？我新屋企啊，去新屋企啦。
So who would want it?
邊個要舉手？
So anyone?
冇人要約櫃喎。
And nobody wanted it, the art of
唔
God.
去你屋企。喂，大衛你又唔要？
So apparently, okay, take it
哇！
to
你
his
靠
house.
害啊！我
So-
好多人第一個反應咁樣啊。
So David, why didn't you want it? So you're bringing a curse to me.
嗱，如果我哋有咁嘅思想嘅時候，我哋值得諗點解俄別以東當大衛話俾佢，佢冇推。
So apparently, let's imagine when David commanded, okay, let's take the art of God to Obed-Edom. And Obed-Edom, he did not refuse.
俄別以東係以東嘅僕人，
So Obed-Edom, he is the
聖經
servant of
形容
Edom.
到咧，俄別以東係加特人啊！
So apparently Obed-Edom, he's a Gittite.
所以你要知道咧，俄別以東係有猶太人嘅 background 嚟㗎。
So certainly Obed-Edom had certain like Jewish traits.
但點解又叫佢做加特人？加特人咧係非利士嘅一個城。
So apparently, Gittite, is a city, with the Philistines.
咁有可能一樣就係俄別以東一家咧，因為嗰個政治嘅環境，搬咗去非利士，已經住咗喺加特呢一個城裏邊一個頗長嘅時間，住得耐啲咪嗰個人咯。
So apparently Obed-Edom has some Jewish background, but, he had moved to a Gittite for quite some time. So therefore, people name him, hey, he is a
你
Gittite.
試下，
So
你而家翻香港啊，不過你翻唔到啫嘛。
let's say you move back to Hong Kong.
你翻
And
香港啲
right
人
now
話
you can't go.
點叫你啊？
So how would people call
佢
you?
唔會叫你香港人㗎，
So people
佢叫你
are
加拿大人㗎。
so people are going to call
點
you.
解
You're a
？I'm
Canadian.
born in Hong Kong。
But well,
但
I
你
was
加拿大
thinking,
人，
but they would say, hey,
你
you're
知
a
唔知你咩
Canadian.
人嚟啊？你咩啊？你 Canadian 啊？你自己都係咁講啦。
So apparently you would say, I'm not Hong Kongese, I'm Canadian.
你明嘛？咁所以可能個背景嘅時候，俄別以東已經去過一個猶太人有利未嘅背景，去到非利士遠居好耐。
So apparently Obed-Edom has Jewish background. He belongs to the Levi tribe. But he moved to Philistine in the city of Gittite for quite some time.
因為而家大衛重建咗個國家，佢要翻嚟啦。
So now that David, had rebuilt his kingdom, so therefore he decided, Obed-Edom decided to move back to the city.
咁所以喺當中嘅時候，我哋嘗試分析點解俄別以東係容許約櫃留喺佢家裏邊。
So now that, you are learning that why Obed-Edom agreed to have the art of God to be stationed in his house.
一個利未背景嘅人，
So he belongs to the
去
Levi
到
tribe.
遠方，
So he moved away like to a far away place.
想去親近神，想去侍奉神嘅機會好少啊，冇啊。
So it was almost impossible for him like to serve the Lord being far away.
我翻嚟，
But now that, he
係
had
利未人。
moved back, I'm a Levi.
坐低咧加特人，
So then, my home is in, I'm a Gittite.
嗱，所以佢一股雄心翻到聖城嘅時候，希望能夠有機會去服侍神。所以咁喺呢個機會嘅時候，一嚟到嘅時候，俄別以東第一個反應，我要。
So Obed-Edom, being so far away for so long now that he moved back to the city of David. So his first response when David said, move, the art of God to him, his first response was, you sure? Yes, yes, I will have it.
俄別以東佢好反省到佢一個侍奉好渴慕、好珍惜嘅一個嘅心態。
So apparently Obed-Edom truly treasure this particular opportunity to be able to serve the Lord.
我嚟，我可以
So let me do it.
連我
I
屋企
can. I'm capable. My home is open.
一個珍惜侍奉主嘅機會。
Someone who really cherished and treasured this opportunity to serve his Lord.
弟兄姊妹，呢個值得我哋學習。
Brother and sister, this is truly a lesson, worthy of our
好啦
learning.
曾幾何時，啱啱我哋侍奉嘅時候，哎呀，編到我好認真，我好恭敬，我好預備。
So certainly, when we first started, perhaps, your first opportunity to serve, you would take it very seriously.
去到一個嘅程度，我哋就會心裏邊忽略咗侍奉嗰種嘅機會嘅珍惜。我啊，唔係啊。
Had it become that, we've been serving for quite a while, that maybe a first response would be, oh, me again?
俄別以東去珍惜侍奉嘅機會。
Obed-Edom, he cherished, the opportunity to serve the Lord.
留意第11節。
And verse 11,
耶和華嘅約櫃在加特人俄別以東家中3個月，耶和華賜福給俄別以東。
so the art of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom like the Gittite for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household.
我相信羅別爾通有一個信念，
I trust that, Obed-Edom, like carry, this notion in his mind.
約櫃嚟到佢屋企，
The ark of the Lord, has arrived, in his house.
佢諗都冇諗過
He certainly never really given much thoughts to
呢
it,
個係咒詛。
whether, it was a curse coming to him,
喺佢嘅信念裏邊，
because in his belief,
約櫃能夠嚟到我屋企係一個光榮，係一個祝福嘅事。
the ark of God coming to his home is such a glorifying and a pressure,
因為
things
約
happen to
櫃
him.
係代表神嘅同在。
Because the ark of the Lord represents the presence of
如
God.
果神喺我家裏邊嘅同在嘅時候，呢個係一個祝福嚟。
So the presence of Lord in my house, this is truly a blessing.
你信唔相信？
Do you believe?
你信唔信？如果神喺你屋企掌管，
If
呢個
the,
係一定係祝福。
if the Lord has come to your house and taking charge of your home, certainly, that will be a blessing.
弟兄姊妹，你相信啊？
Brother and sister, do you really
你
believe
肯
that?
俾約櫃去你屋企嘛？
Would you have the ark of God coming to your home?
如果你相信我哋去親近神，神同我哋同在，一定係祝福嘅時候，你有冇珍惜去親近神嘅機會啊？
So if you believe, like, the art of God being in your home, for you to come closer to God, it's such a blessing, then have we taken that opportunity to come close to God?
出埃及記裏邊應許過，都喺約櫃嘅當中，神要與你們有約會。
Certainly, in the book of Exodus, it says that, that I will meet you there, God said.
神親近你，
God
你親近
comes
神
to
啊！
God comes close to you and you come close to him.
俄別以東好歡迎約櫃，因為佢裏邊渴慕親近神。
Obed-Edom welcomed the art of God because he, in his heart and mind, yearned to come close to God.
雅各書提醒我哋，你哋親近神，神必親近你們。
So in the book of James, that if you
神
come
親
close to
近
God,
你係一個蒙福嘅途徑。
certainly God coming close to you, is a pathway
你相
of
信
getting
嗎？
blessed.
你
Do
相
you
信？
believe?
你相信？
Do you believe?
你留意，上一節講到神，我約櫃喺俄別以東家中3個月，耶和華賜福給邊個？俄別以東和他的全家。
So the art of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household.
呢個祝福係咪唔單止係俾俄別以東，佢成家都係。
Certainly not just, for Obed-Edom. God's blessing is for his entire household.
可能佢哋都啲仔女都問阿爸，你有冇諗清楚啊？
Or perhaps, his
Usat.
offsprings would say,
烏撒呢個利未人
have you-
都慘死喎！
have you thought out clearly?
我好
Because
驚
like,
啊！我係你個仔，
so Uzzah, he
好
was a
驚啊！
Levite,
個
he
係我
died.
啊！
So I don't want to die. Like, are you
嗱我唔知
okay?
會唔會咁樣諗，
I'm not so sure
但係如
whether,
果係咁諗，
but indeed, his offspring, were
我
to
相信俄別以
be
東
thinking.
一定會同佢咁講。
And I trust that Obed-Edom, would clearly say to his family members,
放心啊仔，
so you be rested, my
如果你
son.
敬敬畏畏尊重神，神一定尊重你。
So when we have reverence for God, and I trust that God would do the same for us.
點解約櫃係一個咒詛啊？係一個祝福嚟嘅傻仔。
So why would the art of God be a curse? But
不過我哋
indeed,
要-
it is a blessing for us.
我哋唔好輕忽，
So let's
我哋
not
唔好忽視，
not take this for granted and not to ignore this.
我哋恭恭敬敬迎接，我哋一定祝福嘅。
We come with reference, like to before the Lord, and then we shall be blessed.
歷代志上嘅26章，
In First Chronicles, chapter 26, it said,
神好祝福俄別以東
God blessed Obed-Edom.
8個仔，
So he had
我都係得
eight,
4個嘅。
he had 8 sons. I only have 4.
當時有仔係祝福嚟㗎嘛。
So apparently at the time, having sons, was truly a
仲有
blessing.
孫。
So he had grandchildren.
聖經講到啊，因為神賜福與俄別以東，佢啲孫佢啲仔係咪啊？都係大能嘅勇士，掌管父親的家。
So apparently, for God had blessed Obed-Edom. So his sons, they were leaders in their father's family because they were very capable men.
英文聖經譯得好啊 ，very capable， 唔單止 capable，very very capable。
So apparently 佢哋係大能嘅勇士、壯士。
即係有能力、有智慧，係咪啊？美貌與智慧、能力並重，真係。
So they were physically strong and they were intellectually bright.
係咪啊？唔係淨係似自己大隻。
And not only
自己伸手攞約櫃，亦都好 capable。
And certainly not just relying on their physical strength.
如果你留意聖經喺歷代志下25章24節講。
So if you pay attention to the Old Testament, the second book of Chronicles, chapter 25.
之前嗰段經文講到佢啲仔係管理佢阿爸嘅家，咁即係管乜嘢咧？而家歷代志下話俾我聽啦，又將俄別以東所看守神殿裏一切嘅金銀和器皿，即係俄別以東看咩啊？看聖殿裏邊一啲聖物喎。
So apparently we just read Obed-Edom's sons, they were given duties to take charge of in here. So Obed-Edom took all the gold and silver and all the articles found in the temple of God that had been in his care.
因為俄別以東呢一個行動嘅時候咧，日後可能咧整個聖殿又好，或者王委派俄別以東看守聖殿一切物件專職，由邊個做？冇人可以做。俄別以東一家做。
So apparently, because of Obed-Edom's own commitment and his response, so he inherited basically, the job of taking care of all the artifacts, golds and silvers, and whatever in the temple that he and his next generations had been put in charge of taking care of these things.
Not fair， 點解其他唔可以做？
So you might ask, not fair. Why would
你係咪想死？
So
你哋個個都咁輕率嚇，咁唔小心，俄別以東一家，真係好敬畏神，好唔輕率啊，好尊重，係咪啊？佢按照規矩，所以佢負責啲聖物，唔係個個都真係委派你轉頭就死咗佢㗎啦。
So apparently, no one dared to take on this job, but Obed-Edom demonstrated, his faithfulness, his reverence, and his being very thoughtful about taking care of, these articles, these holy, sanctified articles for God.
提醒我哋乜嘢叫敬畏。
So Obed-Edom truly taught us what it meant by holding reverence for God and his things.
喺任何嘅環境。
So regardless of the circumstances that you're in,
珍惜侍奉主嘅機會。
certainly cherishing and treasure, these opportunities to
喺
serve
任
the Lord
何嘅情況，
in all situations.
我都相信侍奉主係蒙福。
And I trust that serving the Lord, it's a blessed endeavor.
弟兄姊妹，
Brothers and sisters,
你相信？
do you believe this?
你相信？
Do you believe this?
如果我哋相信今日我哋應該點樣去侍奉主？
So if we believe this thing,
我哋
how are we
嗰
going
種
to
熱
serve
切
the Lord?
侍奉主嗰種積極，
And are we being active
Yeah,
and
Marty.
committed in the ways we serve the Lord?
讓我哋喺俄別以東身上學一個功課。
So let us learn from Obed-Edom, his experiences.
最後，
And at the end,
我哋睇大衛。
so let's turn back to David.
大衛有冇做錯？
Did David make a mistake?
你會留意整段經文嘅時候咧，大衛嘅心係好嘅，好想約櫃嚟到，但係對比過去嘅時候，大衛做錯咗兩件事。
So even though David had a good heart and he thought wanted to bring the art of God in, but somehow that, there are two things that, he did wrong.
嗱，你會留意咧喺呢件事情上邊咧，聖經冇記載咧，大衛去尋求神啊，好冇啊，將你嘅約櫃擺嚟啊，係嘛？但係跟住咗見聖殿嘅時候，佢又有做啲嘢。
So apparently, if you read carefully, there were a couple things that David had failed to do, or maybe ignore.
但係喺撒母耳記下6章第1、第2節嘅時候，強調咗幾樣嘢。
So in chapter 6 of second book of Samuel, in verses 1 and 2, certain things were emphasized.
大衛有成3萬嘅跟隨者。
So David at the time had about
大衛喺
30,000
當
men
時可能
followers.
有佢嘅智囊團。
So David had his own caucus.
所以第2節嘅時候講話，大衛起身率領跟隨他的眾人前往。可能大衛就將嗰個智囊團，好啊，我哋好冇將約櫃運嚟啦。智囊團話梗係好啦，係咪？跟住咧就唔使求問神啦，咁佢哋自己做呢個決定。
So apparently he and all of his men set out from Bala of Judah to bring up the Ark of God. So they kind of decided, yeah, it was a good thing to do this.
可能大衛喺呢個時候已經去自己建立咗個國家，你覺得各樣自己穩妥，忽略咗去尋求神呢一個好單純嘅態度。
So apparently now that David, had moved along, setting up his own kingdom, have his own capital city, now that, he behaves quite confident that, he could kind of make decisions for himself instead of going first to the Lord and ask.
可能喺我哋人生裏邊經歷一啲好特別嘅轉捩點，我哋唔知道點做，我哋會尋求神，但係而家個工作穩穩定定啊，我哋讀書啊穩穩定定啊，我哋各方面會唔會我哋再好單純地去倚靠神？
And certainly now that, as in your life, maybe now you're very competent, like you have settled in school or in work, that everything seems to be going well, that have we ignore, the fact that, we would kind of go to the Lord and seek his will first.
第3節。
In verse 3,
他們將神嘅約櫃從江上亞比拿達嘅家中抬出來，放在新車上。
verse 3, they set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill.
大衛可能個腦裏邊個重點咪抬與牛車嘅問題啦。
So apparently, what was on David's mind, seemed off, it was not the same as before.
神啊，我尊重你㗎，我整架新嘅俾你。
So certainly, he might be thinking, hey,
Four-wheel.
Lord, I'm going to build a new
即係有
cart
4
for
個
you.
轆啊
I'm going to build a new cart with
哇
4 wheels.
係啦，新嘅，
So it's a new cart.
最口手、最名牌嘅。
So it was the most precious, of the
嗱
brand name.
喺呢個經文嘅時候，大衛嘅重眼點嘅時候，只係着重個新車。
So apparently, seemingly, David's focus was on building a new cart.
佢嘅重眼點只係，我覺得呢個價值係最好，有冇忽略咗神要求係乜嘢？
So, David thought so this cart was good. It was new. But he somehow neglect certain things.
當我哋好快去入嘅時候，點解大衛會有咁嘅表現？
So, when we kind of responded quickly,
大衛冇意識到牛車係一個問題，因為點解佢喺非利士住咗年幾啊？
so apparently, he was not able to see, why, a cart
可能
shouldn't be
呢啲嘅-
used because he's been
可
living
能
in
呢啲嘅
Philistine for a
風
year.
俗習慣，佢已經去接收晒，而忽略咗究竟神想點。
So David apparently had gotten used to, how things should be done, in the land of Philistine. So he failed to see what God's will
可能佢
was.
將嗰個文化去冚過嘅神嘅心意。
So certainly, the local culture, the folklore had surpassed, and kind of clouded, his judgment.
當時大衛嗰個價值觀、嗰個權力，可能掩蓋咗對神嘅敬畏嘅心。
So at the time, the cultural folklore, or maybe like David, his own kind of like perception, of his power and abilities had shrouded the way, he's holding reverence for God.
弟兄姊妹，可能好容易我哋會講一句：而家啲人個個都係咁噶啦。
So perhaps, brother and sister, it might be easy for us to think that, well, now everybody do the same thing.
會唔會呢一種嘅意識籠罩掩蓋咗神喺你生命裏邊自尊自敬嘅地位？
Would that kind of like mentality, be kind of blinding us, like, and prevented us from kind of like really seeing God, as who he really is and holding reverence for him?
但係感謝神，大衛喺呢件事學咗一個功課。
But certainly, in this incident, David also kind of took his lesson.
當從俄別以東家運去大衛城嘅路程嘅當中，呢件事大衛唔同晒。
So certainly, when David moved, like, the ark of God from the home of Obed Edom, like, to
大衛
his
有
city.
7方面唔同。
So there are 7 areas that King David, had done differently.
佢唔係再憂愁。
So certainly, he wasn't sad and
佢12
troubled.
節講到嘅時候，歡歡喜喜的將神嘅約櫃從俄別以東家中抬到大衛嘅城裏。
So apparently David rejoicing, and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the
繼
city
續
of David.
歡歡喜喜嘅侍奉主。
So, he was rejoicing, he was happy, he continued to
跟
serve
住
the
嘅
Lord.
聖經好強調佢係抬耶和華嘅約櫃啊。
So apparently in the scripture, the ark of God was carried.
唔係再用車，
So certainly, it was no
恭
longer
恭
being moved
敬
by a
敬
cart.
嘅去抬住耶和華嘅約櫃，按住神嘅吩咐。
So apparently, he had people carrying the ark of the Lord respectfully into his city.
人走6步就獻祭啦。
So, when people like took 6 steps,
點解
then he
要咁做啊？
sacrificed a bull. Why did he do that?
佢看重同神嘅關係，
Because David valued, his relationship
唔
with
想
God.
唔想任何嘅罪攔咗神嘅同在。
So he certainly would not allow any sins and transgressions be standing in between, his
聖經
relationship with God.
記載大衛王冇着皇服，而穿着細麻布嘅以弗得。
So apparently, David at the time was wearing a linen ephod. He was
Okay.
dancing before
一
the
個
Lord.
聖服，
So it
恭
was
恭敬敬嘅加入敬拜嘅團隊。
a sanctified costume, and he participated in the whole processions.
你會留意14節強調在耶和華面前極力嘅跳舞。
Apparently in verse 14, David, he danced before the Lord with
乜嘢叫-
all his might.
乜嘢叫極力？
What does that mean by with all his
現代
might?
有一個字咧，可能幫到你學乜嘢叫極力。
So what does it mean by he danced with all his
現
might?
代人有一個字叫 hea 啊，
So in
知你點翻譯。
Cantonese, there's a colloquial expression. You let loose, maybe?
但冇所謂啊，做下啦，企喺度啦，喐下個口啦，啊！大衛唔係啊，哇！讚美神啊，佢真係自己全情嘅投入。
So instead of being haphazardly, like not motivated,
唔好忘記，
but David was very different. He used all his might
唔
to
好忘
dance.
記，大衛係一個王，
So don't forget, like, David, it's now a king.
佢可以坐喺度，你哋做啊！
So he can sit there, and
David-
just let people do it.
睇到一樣敬拜侍奉神，佢唔願意做一個旁觀者，做一個觀眾，佢願意做一個參與者，積極嘅參與者。
So apparently David never wanted to be just a spectator, an observer, but when it comes to serving the Lord, he participated fully with all
聖
his
經
might.
形容到喺運送約櫃進到大衛城嘅途之後嘅時候，大衛最後做咗一樣嘢。
So apparently when the ark of God was carried into the city of David, and David had done certain things.
就奉耶和華嘅名給民祝福，
So David blessed the people in the name of the Lord Almighty.
最後祝福。
So he gave blessings.
咦？你留意第20節。
So look to verse 20.
大衛回家要給家眷做咩啊？祝福。
So David also returned home to bless his household.
大衛嗰種嘅情況恭恭敬敬讓約櫃嚟到大衛城，我一齊敬拜，好開心，我祝福你祝福到上癮喎。
So apparently when the
見
order of
親人
God,
就祝福你啊！
so when the order of God came into his city, David was so
哎
committed.
呀，翻到屋企，冇做嘢住，祝福先，祝福先。
So he blessed, his people, and he returned home and blessed his family members.
原來一個敬畏神嘅人，被佢親近神，生命嗰種嘅改變嘅時候，係將個祝福周圍拋開去啦。
So, he was so touched, by the presence of God that, he started going everywhere to everyone to bring blessings to them.
甚至啊，
So
佢嘅
even,
太太掃羅嘅女米甲，
so even like, his wife, like the daughter, Michal, the daughter of Saul.
你見到大衛跳舞啊！
So, Michal saw like David
跟住
dancing.
啲人咧一齊手舞足蹈啊！
So, David apparently was dancing and
聖經
shaking
講
his
到咧，
arms and legs.
阿米甲見到老公翻嚟，
So apparently Michal, seeing, her husband coming home.
你知唔知佢講咩？
So Michal make a
哎
statement.
呀，皇帝你今日真係威水咯，中街跳舞啊，打出晒咯！
So Michal, like, make a comment. Well, you will become
哎呀，
even
真係智
more-
威係你咯，打出晒咁
So,
樣，
so
係咪？
now that, you have kind of like disrupt yourself, you distinguish yourself, disrupting in front of the girls of the servants.
大衛點同米甲講？
So David had a response, and David said to her,
大衛話：我也必更加卑微，我自己看為輕賤。
so David said, I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes.
一個敬畏神嘅人會睇自己好卑微。
Someone who hold reverence for God would look to themselves, as someone being undignified.
大衛雖然做錯，但係佢悔改，學習敬畏嘅功課。
So even David, he had made mistakes, but, he was able to repent and held reverence for God.
乜嘢叫敬畏？
What does that mean by holding reverence?
除咗我哋希望神將恩雨降下，
So not only that we wish, God shower us with his blessings,
敬畏神嘅人係歡歡喜喜去侍奉主，
certainly someone who hold reverence for God is
Kingdom.
someone serving with joy
按神嘅吩咐去服侍主，
and constantly following the commands of the
看
Lord
重
and serve.
神同佢嘅關係，
And regards, his or her relationship with God as sacred.
佢懂得每一次侍奉都係一個分別為聖嘅機會，
Understanding each service, it's
佢
being
自己
sanctified,
全
sanctified
人嘅投入，
and to kind of participate wholly and fully.
讓呢個祝福唔單止停留喺自己，讓佢所認識嘅人都得到呢一個敬畏帶嚟嘅祝福。
So spreading, the blessings of God, like not just to himself, herself, but, to the rest of the others.
生命更加謙卑。
And, and come with like such humility.
如果我哋最初問一問大家，你點樣衡量自己係咪一個敬畏神嘅人？
So let's go back to the question that how do you know that, you have held reference
我唔
for
係問
God?
你想唔想敬畏。
And I'm not asking you whether you wish,
今
or
日
not.
如果我哋嚟到聖餐嘅台前去反省自己下係咪一個敬畏神嘅人嘅時候，我哋有冇大衛嗰種嘅喜樂？我哋有冇聽從神嘅吩咐？我有冇看重同神嘅關係？我有冇分別為聖？我有冇積極嘅參與？我有冇好好透過去敬拜祝福我周圍所認識嘅人？有冇謙卑自己嚟到神嘅面前？
So these are the categories for us, in answering the questions, have I kind of like held reverence for God, have fear for the Lord, that would we be like David himself, that serving Lord with joy, following his commands, keeping, his relationship with God as sacred and holy, actively participating, sharing his blessings with others and being humble.
如果我哋話要去敬畏神，
So let's say that, we would have reverence for God.
如果大衛係一個敬畏嘅模式，邊一個嘅地方係你最需要有改善？
So if we turn to David and treat like David as our role model, that in
你
these 7 areas, what aspect of it, would still need work from you?
你要點樣去改善？
And how are you going to improve?
求主幫助你同我。
May the Lord help us.
敬畏耶和華係智慧嘅開端。
The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
撒母耳記下嘅第6章，烏撒犯錯，
In second book of Samuel, chapter 6, that Uzzah made a serious mistake.
神唔想你同我落喺烏撒嘅罪嘅當中。
God never wanted us to fall into the sins of Uzzah.
俄別以東
Obed-Edom,
積極嘅侍奉，
that he actively served
因為
his
佢
Lord.
相信佢敬畏神、侍奉主，佢自己佢一家必定蒙福。
For he truly believed, having fear of the Lord and actively serve the Lord would bring along blessings from the Holy
大
One.
衛敬畏嘅表現，
So David's, his very own
讓今天嘅
reverie of the Lord,
讓今天成為一個嘅量度，讓我哋每一個人去量度自己。我哋
So-
今日係咪一個敬畏主嘅人？
may today be the day, that we evaluate, of ourselves that, am I a believer that we hold reverence of the Lord in
如
our
果
hearts and
你
mind?
有反省嘅話，
If you have such reflections,
你就好容易去答呢一個嘅題目：為何我要歌頌耶穌？
then, it would be easy, for you to respond
你
and say,
唱呢
why
一
do
首
I
嘅詩
sing
歌，
about
唔
Jesus?
係單係一首詩歌咁簡單，
Certainly, this hymn, it's not just a hymn
係你一
itself.
個認定，係你一個信念，
And certainly, this is an affirmation
係你一個
and
嚮
your
往，
conviction.
係你一個嚮往，
Certainly, a yearning
係你一個立志。
and certainly your own commitment to the Lord.
讓我哋一齊起立，我哋唱一首詩歌作為回應。
So let's stand and let's sing this song as a response.